Hello from beautiful Cape Cod, Massachusetts. I'm here at the Crest World Tourism Forum. I'm about to go do a fireside chat about financing sustainable tourism and the future of sustainable travel. Let's go check it out.
I'm super excited to introduce our next two panelists that are coming up here for our first fireside chat. It is titled Financing the Future, Who Pays for Sustainable Tourism? We're going to get a really broad range of perspectives here from two people, all the way from the investment side to the consumer side. And so I'm just really excited to hear from both of them. And please help me and welcome up our first panelist. She is the founder of Tilted Map. If you haven't checked her out, amazing blog. Check out her social media presence. She's all over the place. And we're so thankful that she drove over here and is participating on this panel. Give it up for Ketti Wilhelm.
Thank you, Wes.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And also coming up here, please put your hands together for the Senior Director of Impact and Operations at the UnTours Foundation. So excited to have all the way from the West Coast as well, Sarah Payne with us. Thank you, Sarah.
Is this on? Yes.
We're good.
Great. Cool.
Thanks, Wes. So really excited to chat about this topic, financing the future of tourism. I work for the UnTours Foundation, which does impact investing, specifically in travel and tourism companies through our Reset Tourism Fund. So obviously my role in this conversation is pretty straightforward. We're financing businesses that are aligned with sustainability. But Ketti, I'm curious to ask you more about how do travelers fit into this conversation when we talk about financing the future that we want to see of this industry?
Yeah, so I have a much maybe less straightforward role in this in this chat as a travel writer, travel blogger. I guess what we were talking about before is sort of the idea that who's really financing travel at the end of the day is travelers, right? Who's paying for all of this? And so just to give you a little bit more on my background, I used to be a travel journalist, and then since 2019 have been writing a blog about realistic ways to travel more sustainably. So I try to show people sort of three broad categories to get them hooked and interested in sustainable tourism. Through showing people ways to keep more money in local communities when they travel, use less plastic, and reduce carbon emissions. And at the end of the day, when we're talking about financing tourism, we have to get tourists to pay for things, right? So that's kind of the original financer of sustainable travel.
Super interesting. And from your perspective, as you're seeing more and more travelers adopting sustainability, what is it that they're looking for? Or what are the gaps that you still see in talking about sustainability?
Yeah. So we were talking about this a little bit in the breakout session that I just had. What tourists are looking for, what travelers are looking for, is the basic stuff that we all think is too basic to even mention. You know, they're looking for not having plastic water bottles in their hotel rooms. They're looking for maybe having EV chargers in the parking lots. They're looking for locally sourced products in their hotels or restaurants. That's it. And I think that it's easy for us in this room, who are all interested in sustainability, we're all experts in sustainability, we're all working on issues that are much further advanced than that, to forget that those are the things that tourists, the people that we are working with and working for, those are the things that they look for. And if they don't see those things done right, people are jaded right now, right? I mean, this is a stressful time to be in the world. We have a lot of crises. And when people see things done wrong, they're very quick to scream greenwashing or to say, oh, well, if they're not doing this part right, then I assume that they're not doing anything else right. So I think that's kind of we need to remember to go back to basics with all kinds of tourism businesses, with DMOs, with hotels, with tour companies, because getting those things right is really the permission that travelers give us to then say, okay, I'll listen to all of the other things that you're doing that are beyond the traveler's knowledge and beyond what they're aware of. So I think that's the starting point.
It's the starting point, right? Because that's kind of like your buy-in to be able to talk about being a sustainable operator. But then I see that as like the floor, right? Like there's more that you can do on top of that, and we want to incentivize more of that behavior. So I'm curious, when you're working with brands and what you're trying to promote to travelers, what do you look for that establishes those credentials of well-meaning sustainability, that they've ticked those minimum boxes, and then what else are they doing?
Yeah, so I don't have like a checklist of exactly what I'm looking for in a partner for a blog collaboration or a social media collaboration. But what I am looking for is really, it's a vibe. I am looking for...
Here for the vibe.
We're here for the vibes. I am looking for honesty. I'm looking for them being open about what they're doing right and what they still need to improve. If I hear, oh, we're a tour company, we do sustainable tourism. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that when I introduce myself and they say, oh yeah, we'd love to work with you. We do sustainable tourism. And I say, what does that mean to you? And they say, well, we're sustainable. You know? So yeah, what I look for is details. I look for awareness. I look for not saying that you've got everything figured out, because nobody has everything figured out.
You have to have the community.
And then I look for some kind of unique story that place or that company can tell, that I can tell about them, in order to educate people on a new aspect of sustainability that they might not be aware of, or just an aspect that they're really aware of, but they haven't seen done really well. But I'm curious so for you from the finance side, I wonder if that dovetails at all with what you look for when you're looking for project finance.
It does. It really does. And I think it's funny because it is kind of a vibe. Like, we're looking for data and for you to back it up, but like, you can kind of tell, like, you can give it the sniff test. If a company's like, yeah, we practice community impact and we give back, and you start pulling that thread, you're like, how? And they're like, we partner with a local school. You're like, you can quickly start to realize that maybe they're not practicing sustainability at the level that, they are trying to portray. And so I think it is like, authenticity is so important, and that transparency, because, we're in the business of funding not only the leaders that are already practicing the kind of tourism we want to see in the future, that's sustainable and inclusive, regenerative, all the buzzwords, but also companies that know where they are on that journey and want to improve. So that can be honest about, we've tried this, it didn't work, we're really committed to this value, we want to, whatever it is, transition to more renewable energy, measure and reduce our water usage. And then we can come in and help them to do that by providing capital. So it's like, just be honest about where you are on this stage, because I think, as you're saying, like, consumers can sniff it out, influencers can sniff it out, investors can sniff it out. And so that focus on like just showing up and being authentic, I mean, like, life lesson, right? But seriously, but in this industry, I think it's so important to not try to sugarcoat, to be, what you are, and then move from there. Like, build on your strengths, build on the commitments that you already have. And that's where other resources can come in and help, financing just being one of them. But to that point, I think there are a lot of resources that the consumer and that businesses need, right, when they're trying to travel more sustainably or trying to practice sustainability better. What, from your perspective, are some of those resources that you can give consumers? And is it really just trying to give them tips to, quote, practice sustainability? Or is it actually just saying, this is a really cool way to travel. It is sustainable, but by traveling this way, you're going to get a more authentic, maybe a slower experience. So what does that look like for you, and how you sort of talk about this?
Yeah, so I think that the example from Newport this morning was an excellent example, because Newport isn't going out and telling tourists, hey, if you take our trolley, you can reduce the climate impact of your trip to Newport. They're saying, if you take our trolley, you can avoid the parking hassle and save money and not be stuck in traffic. And I think that that's something that we need to get better at, just integrating sustainability into the way we're developing tourism without trying to have the marketing be this separate thing. I feel, in my experience, studying sustainability and working in sustainability, I find that a lot of times sustainability people are very afraid of marketing. They think it's very dirty and a bad word, and they don't want to hear about it. But really, it's just finding a different way to promote practices that are more sustainable as the fact that they're also going to be a better experience. Like we were talking about before, last year for the first time, I hosted an influencer trip where my husband and I brought 7 people mostly from the United States on a bike trip in Italy. 5 of them had never been to Italy before. And we didn't take them to Venice and Rome and Florence. We took them to Monte Carotto and Cirolo and Fabriano, these places that nobody has ever heard of, that are a few hours away from Rome and Venice, and that would love to have more tourists visit. And we got them to sign up by hooking them in with, the sexy landscapes and the pictures of bowls of pasta and glasses of wine, which you get anywhere you go in Italy. But you just really sell it on the fact that this is going to be a better experience, a more unique experience, a more almost, luxury, elevated experience, because you're not going to be in this throng of tourists. And I know we've said, okay, do we want to talk about over-tourism or do we want to talk about under-management? There's definitely, there's both sides of the coin, but travelers want to go have the experience that they've seen on the postcard. And at the end of the day, if you can convince them that they can have the same experience by going to a rural part of a region that they've never heard of, they'll do it if you explain it and you sell it, without making it sound dirty and saying we have to sell sustainability.
You're not selling sustainability at that point, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're selling. Yeah, exactly. You're selling an experience, and people were talking about this morning, the concept of demarketing, right? It's the same thing with working with influencers. So for me, from the opposite side, I spend a lot of time sort of educating travel companies on what they should be looking for when they're trying to work with influencers, because a lot of times they get started and they say, okay, we want to work with a travel influencer. Find me the biggest travel influencer. Find me somebody with 1 million followers.
The most followers.
Yes, give me the most followers. And it's like, you don't need to find somebody who has the biggest audience. You need to find somebody who's able to tell your story and how that's special. Because, if I have 1 million followers on Instagram, I don't, but if I did, that doesn't mean I'm going to be bringing 1 million people to your destination, right? Especially if they're not interested in the kind of travel that you are talking about, that you're offering.
Yeah, super interesting. And that kind of, one of the threads that we had talked about before is some of the resource gaps on the business side. So obviously, we started this fund and we're investing in entrepreneurs because there's a lack of capital and funding. We've referenced that here today. But also I think there's these other needs, right? Like visibility and like exposure. And so we go back to like choosing the right partners to do that, because not everyone is going to be the right partner for your business. And so I think a lot of it is also knowing your audience and what is the kind of tourism that you want to see in your communities. And that kind of ties in for me. Ketti and I have had a lot of conversations in prep for our fireside chat, and there's a lot of threads we want to talk about. And I think one of them is this idea of local agency and local ownership. So one of the kind of common things in looking for businesses that we want to promote, whether it's on Instagram or on the blog or in our portfolio, is, do these communities and do these companies, do they want you here and do they want your capital? And I think that is so key, because there has to be that invitation, right? And so we were talking about a few examples of that, and I'm curious, like, what have been some examples that you have seen of locally led initiatives around sustainability that have really resonated with people?
Yeah, so I guess one that comes to mind, one of my favorite examples is in the island of Paros in Greece, which in the last couple of years has become a little bit of a poster child for over-tourism. And so I'm curious to see what exactly it would be like now. But when I was there 4 years ago, they had a local organization that was externally funded, but it was local people running this organization called Clean Blue Paros, which was trying to reduce single-use plastics in the community. So they were educating in schools, they were providing recycling facilities that didn't exist, recycling collection facilities that really didn't exist in the community before that. And I think most visibly and maybe most importantly, they were educating businesses and business owners and bartenders about the importance of not using single-use plastics. So wherever you went on that island, I could bring my water bottle to a bar and ask them to refill it, and they didn't look at me funny like I was a crazy person for wanting this. And you go to the next island over. I mean, it's easy to think, oh, this must just be the way it is in Greece. No, you go one island over, and they wouldn't do it. They thought that was the strangest concept. On Paros, there were no plastic straws, there were no plastic water bottles, and there were water bottle refill stations everywhere because of this local community initiative. So I also wonder how something like that maybe could be part of, is that something that you would look for when you're looking for projects to fund? Do you need to see like community buy-in before you can fund a project? Or do you need to see tourism numbers increasing, or, interest in, I don't know, through any kind of metrics like that, that can also be related to how it's being marketed and how successful it's already been in order to fund?
Yeah, great questions. I think we definitely look for that community buy-in. So when a company says to us that they're based in the community and that they give back to the community, again, like, prove that out. Who are you hiring? Who's leading the company? Who owns the company? Those are definitely things that kind of the crux of kind of like minimum requirements, is that you have to have the community's license to operate there. But for us, we really try to strike the balance of wanting rigor in our assessment of companies that are applying for funding, but also making it accessible. So we don't put up front like too many restrictions on specific initiatives that you have, or even specific sustainability metrics. When we look for a company to invest in, we're looking for, can you handle investment? Do you have a financial track record? Do you actually have real relationship with the community and respect for where you are located? And then really just these commitments to drive forward, again, what we see as needing to be the future of the industry. And beyond that, I mean, things like certifications are great to see, but they're not the end all be all for us. And we also want to be part of that journey. So again, it goes back to, if a company is pretty honest with us and in their application process says, we know we can improve here, then hopefully we can come along and try to help them with whatever that challenge is that they're facing. So yeah, for us as investors, I think that that is so important, though, is that community piece and that ownership piece. Now, on the other hand, it is sometimes hard to find, and I'll just be really honest, oftentimes in countries, the regenerative hotels and the ones like that are really like out there leading, it's because they have big budgets to do so. And frankly, oftentimes they're founded and led by expats. They're not from the communities. They've come with their resources and they've developed something really cool, but that could actually be genuinely giving back to that community, leaving it destination positive. And so on the one hand, we want to fund, smaller businesses that are locally led, often indigenous led. On the other hand, if we want to highlight the examples to move everyone towards, we do have to balance that with the companies that are already implementing things like wastewater treatment, solar, all of these things that are really capital intensive. And that just kind of ties back to our reason for starting this fund, is that it shouldn't just be these expats that can move to these low-cost countries and start projects that are regenerative and that can be lauded for their sustainability efforts, making that truly accessible to everyone and demystifying what even does investment mean. They may have never taken on financing before, and we can be a catalytic provider of that and help them kind of learn that process.
Yeah, and I think it's also, I think that where the funding comes from is also something that tourists can maybe misinterpret, and it's like what matters more is obviously what they're doing with the funding, not where the money is coming from at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that said, yeah, we really do try to partner with everyone that we invest in. So there's over 50 companies in our portfolio right now, and they're all incredible. And yeah, our job is to highlight them and make sure the world knows about them, and in a variety of different impact areas where they're working, which is often not just environmental sustainability. But I think in these conversations, sometimes we group in and also assume that everyone knows we're talking about social impact, inclusion, accessibility. So a lot of our companies are in a variety of those pillars, often intersecting, but not always, which I think is, frankly, it can be a challenge when you are an impact-driven company or an impact-driven consumer to do everything perfectly, right? I think we were talking at one point, it's like, well, if you've flown to get to the place, then you're already not sustainable. So why do we even try once we're there?
I hear that all the time. That is the biggest question that I get when I tell just, a civilian, a random person that I meet, that I write about sustainable travel. They say, sustainable travel, but don't you fly a lot?
Isn't that an oxymoron?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, okay, sure, we can call it an oxymoron, or we can accept the fact that we live in a society that's built around fossil fuels, and none of us chose for it to be built around fossil fuels, but that's what it is. And there are still so many things that we can do better and do differently and improve. While also, yes, of course, we also need to be investing in sustainable aviation fuel, and I talk about that a lot. We also need to be showing people ways to travel that involve less flying. Yes, we all know that, but we also need to show people that actually the climate impact of your flight is less if you fly during the day. Nobody's ever heard of that. I've never talked to a person who says, oh, you travel too much for you to be able to talk about sustainable travel. People don't ever really know anything other than that sort of like big, scary boogeyman keyword of flight shaming. It's like, that's what I think that flight shaming has done an incredible amount of damage to sustainable travel because it makes people feel bad. I mean, it's obvious, it's in the name, right? It's shaming. And there are so many studies that show that shame doesn't help. It doesn't drive anybody towards action. It makes them feel bad, and it makes them feel like, oh, well, now that I feel like I've done something wrong, I don't want to talk about this anymore. And then they shut down, and then they're not open to whatever's next, which is kind of, now we're off on I'm off on a different tangent that's not related to funding at all.
All interrelated, lots of different paths here. I mean, so in your mind, how do you start to mainstream some of these concepts too? Because, I mean, a lot of travelers, they may not be out there. Like, is there enough of a market right now of people that are looking for sustainable tourism experiences, or?
For sure, yeah. I mean, there's definitely a market. I mean, we've all heard of like the Booking.com studies from years ago that show that 60% or 80%, depending on, the group of people, say that they're willing to pay more for sustainable tourism experiences. And now there were just some studies that have come out in the last year from TripAdvisor, I think, saying that now actually we're seeing people putting their money where their mouth is and not just saying that they're willing to pay more, but actually spending more. So the desire is absolutely there, but people are confused. They don't know what to do. They have decision fatigue. They have too many boxes to check. They're sick of being asked if they want to round up an extra 5 cents to support carbon removal or carbon offsets or sustainable aviation fuel when they don't know what those things mean. So I think we need to work on simplifying things and having more be just built in to what they're paying instead of making everything this separate choices that people have to make.
Right, just making it the better choice to travel sustainably, right?
I think Wes just said that we have only a few minutes left. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Yes.
I want to hear more about how we can make funding available and more accessible to locals who are being displaced due to the expats that come and displace us.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I hope that I can, try to address it a little bit, but I think we're really at the crux of power dynamics here, right? Because, I mean, quite honestly, depending on how we practice tourism, where we do it, it's just the next iteration of colonization. You said be bold, Wes, so I am. But so, I mean, unfortunately, so people are moving into these markets, right? And they are profiting off of them. Hopefully they are trying to provide good jobs to the people that were there and are giving them a voice in whatever the enterprise looks like that they're trying to set up. So for example, buying from local cooperatives for all of the furnishings for the hotels, sourcing from local farmers. We made an investment into an eco lodge in Zambia where part of our revenue share that we would get back every year would be actually distributed. We were going to give up 1% of our revenue share, so we distributed among the employees. So trying to create more equity there, right? But a lot of these dynamics, we're coming in maybe a bit too late sometimes, right? On the other hand, how can you help communities develop their own enterprises so that they don't need to wait for someone to come in and, quote, develop their communities for tourism. So I think a really interesting opportunity is seeing tour operators and travel companies, for example, investing in their own supply chains, investing in the places where they operate. And who are the entrepreneurs that are already there with great ideas, but they may not have the seed funding, or they may not have the bigger pools of capital to bring in more funders, or to get visibility to bring in someone who can highlight their destination. So I think there's hopefully some places where we can have leverage points into that. But I do think it's fundamentally about democratizing power and funding in this ecosystem. And it's on us, for example, to balance that, right? Driving capital where it's going to have impact, but where it's needed and where, frankly, it hasn't gone and needs to go.
And the Reset Tourism Fund does invest in locally owned and run initiatives, right?
Yeah, and we're, just one piece of this. There are other organizations that, for example, provide grant funding or provide technical assistance. Some of them are here in this room, like Planetera. Tourism Cares does really great work with trying to upskill a lot of these businesses to become more market ready and visitor ready. So there's a lot of things that we can do across the industry to make this happen and to really start shifting dollars back to people and to communities. I love that we started today by talking about this isn't tourism. This is community work that we're talking about. These are all people's communities where they live and where they want to see protected. And that really needs to be at the fore, that community decision making, in whatever kind of topic we're talking about with financing the future that we want to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions?
Sure. One quick thing. Do you have any other examples of collaboration between government, nonprofits, industry, and the community? Well, case in point, Cape Cod Commission, they have an awesome program that they're stewarding EV through lodging. Care for the Cape and Islands, we have a federal program for plastic reduction, hospitality, tourism industry, technical assistance, financing, so on and so forth. Working with the town of Orleans to do a comprehensive systemic change across all stakeholders, position the town as the greenest community in the country, as an eco-tourist destination. Are there other examples of those kind of like the four pillars of our communities coming together and kind of sharing the load?
Yeah, great question. A lot of our work, so we launched the fund in January 2023, so we're a couple of years in. Most of our partnerships have been within the private sector, so I think there's definitely room for that engagement with the public sector and with more DMOs. That's something that we need to lean into further, but if we are going to unlock these benefits, that has to be there. A lot of companies we've worked with have had some government funding to, at some point in their journey that's been instrumental just in terms of, making the community, at a baseline, of development. But yeah, we don't have any formal partnerships with public actors or DMOs yet, but we're extremely open to it. I think there's a recognition from us that we started this fund and it was pretty small, but if we want to scale it, we need to bring in those resources. The goal for our fund, it's currently $2 million and we want it to be 10, but that's a drop in the bucket. We need to see a lot more than that if we want this industry to really change. And so if you bring in some of those public dollars and those kind of partnerships, wow, you could really get to scale. So we've had some early conversations with different destinations that have some ideas, but we don't have any formal partnerships yet.
You'll be hearing this. We have some real formal things that are going on.
Amazing. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, on my side, I definitely have partnerships sometimes where it'll be a state tourism board working with a county or municipal tourism board working with a hotel and a tour company and an influencer, and it's like we're sort of but we have to really be scrappy to put those things together piece by piece. So it would be great if there were some sort of pre-organized initiative to bring all of those stakeholders together and help them, reach out to media and bloggers and influencers who are focused on sustainability.
Dare we say we need a framework or a playbook? Can we develop that all together?
Yeah.
There is somewhat of an influx of nonprofit organizations that are starting to deal with sustainability and community responsibility in tourism. I'm a corporate meeting planner, independent, and I work with a lot of corporate clients. And one nonprofit that's actually here started in Massachusetts is called Travel with Purpose Pact. And they go around talking to corporate clients, trying to get them to do more community service projects, sustainability, working with airlines that have a, less of a carbon imprint, footprint and everything. So there are some out there that are, working on funding and working on the mindset of corporate clients to get them to be more responsible.
That's great. I think we just need a lot of collaboration between all of these different pieces. You know, there are so many good nonprofits out there, so many good companies that want to do better, some of these big players that really do want to improve their footprint, as you're saying. Yeah, I think that's it for us. But, you know, I think both of us would love to chat with anyone further. Clearly, we can talk about these topics a lot. So thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.